So, about 2 weeks ago, on the 17th of April 2026, Capcom's Pragmata officially launched on all platforms worldwide to huge success, selling over 1 million units in just 2 days. Pragmata on the surface might initially seem like just another third-person sci-fi shooter, with some clear Last of Us inspiration with a father and adopted daughter type dynamic, but it quickly proves itself to be so much more than that. It takes the formula of Capcom's extremely popular Resident Evil franchise and puts a whole new spin on it to create this brand new IP that has a taste of something familiar that is completely different and unique. This mainly comes through in the form of Diana, who is the second major protagonist behind our main guy, Hugh. While the normal third-person shooting action comes through with him, greatly resembling Resident Evil's combat, Diana is what mixes this up, as while you shoot, you hack the enemies at the same time using Diana's capabilities, doing a minigame that requires focus, strategy, and efficiency to take out enemies and bosses in the most effective way possible. It's definitely not a mechanic that will click with everyone. It actually took me quite a bit to get used to it when I played that first demo a few months ago, but part of the fun is mastering it and getting continuously faster and better. This central mechanic that elevates the core gameplay far beyond what anyone could have expected, along with the game's setting, as well as the simple yet beautiful narrative the game contains, make this an evolutionary masterpiece that will easily stand out as amongst the best games of the year. It was honestly so good that I had to make a quick passion piece talking about how much I love it. So I'm going to go through numbered points about what makes this game so special. We've already covered the central gameplay mechanic of hacking, which I will discuss later on, but for now, let's move on to discussing the narrative. Pragmata has a relatively simple story. The game starts off with Hugh visiting an AI moon base with his crew, when something goes wrong, with his whole crew getting killed, and Hugh barely making it out alive, only thanks to Diana, who finds Hugh shortly after his life support turns off. After saving him, the two quickly form an admiration for each other, and decide to investigate what went wrong, leading them on a mission to turn off Edis, as the AI has gone rogue and has become a threat to Earth. Diana is a robot girl known as a Pragmata, but despite that, she shares many qualities with that of what a human child would have. It's an interesting dynamic for sure, and it's extremely wholesome. The devs did an amazing job of making you love the relationship she has with Hugh, not just in the story cutscenes themselves, but also just during gameplay segments, or even in the hub world. There are so many extra conversations recorded between the two where they simply talk about their lives, and it makes the story feel that much richer. Diana is made even more interesting when she and Hugh discover the presence of 8, who has been trapped in the Terror Dome area of the game, which is the third location you visit. This is where the game almost feels like it's trying to establish a sort of sibling dynamic between the two, but this doesn't happen when 8 is left behind, as the pair are unable to save her. But eventually, she re-emerges later on in the game, when it's revealed she is the one that caused the deaths of all of Hugh's friends, as she has taken control of Edis and plans to send an array of dead filament to Earth to kill the planet once and for all. To be honest, even though I saw this twist coming from a mile away, this is the most interesting aspect of the game to me, because it's a commentary on AI as a whole. Currently, the world is in a very weird place, where everything is falling apart. Of course, one of the various things contributing to that is the rise of artificial intelligence, as it continues to be inserted into every single little corner of the digital world. There's so many different predictions and perspectives about what AI might look like in a futuristic world, such as the one seen in this game. There's so much doom and gloom, but also some optimism here and there. But the perspective Pragmata shares for its characters is one that I find to be very nuanced and balanced. Diana is an AI that was made with a rather cynical purpose, as the doctor that created her intended for her to be nothing more than just something that could save his daughter. When she couldn't do it though, she was replaced by 8, who watched as her creator died and suffered after failing to save his daughter. In his death, he cursed the cruelty of the world, a comment that a lot of people would make when struggling with grief. But 8, being an AI, doesn't understand the emotion and feelings behind that comment. she only understands the literal meaning. Because of that, she doesn't stop to feel. She only thinks, and she sets out to destroy the planet because that's how she interprets the words of Dr. Higgins. This part in particular is a commentary on how AI's interpretation of things can be so destructive, because it can interpret our goals, messages, and intentions in ways that are completely false because it doesn't have the ability to feel. This enters a very dangerous gray zone when it comes to morals. Diana, however, does show the good side of humanity, and she interprets the world completely differently. She sees the beauty of the Earth and wants to see the world for herself. It's such an interesting parallel, but ultimately it links back to the idea that just like how all humans aren't evil, not all AIs are either. Dr. Higgins in of himself is a character foil to Hugh. He casts Diana aside, creates her for the sole purpose of serving him, and even if he didn't have bad intentions, ended up causing harm regardless. Hugh, however, gives Diana a chance. He encourages her, and he never leaves her behind, even in her darkest moments. I was honestly in shock during this whole portion of the game where Hugh attempts to save her from the dead filament that is slowly consuming her. The way she talks about herself with such self-deprecation, how she truly believes that she is nothing, that she is just another failure. It's heartbreaking stuff, but it's also reinforcement of this game's core themes, that AI isn't necessarily harmful on its own. It's harmful depending on how we use it and what we create it for. I mean, think about every other invention humanity has ever made. Whatever that creation is will inevitably reflect the creator, and possibly their intentions. We might interpret it differently depending on the time in which we look back on it, but regardless, there's usually always a clear distinction that can be made between humans with good intent and bad intent. And throughout history, we've always been able to see that through not just what we say and do, but through what we create. And as Pragmata shows, AI is no different. What the game also shows, though, is how dangerous it is to rely on AI. If we nurture artificial intelligence and focus on using the best aspects of our humanity to increase its potential, then we could have a tool that works for the betterment of our society. But if we get to a point similar to where Earth is in this game, where an AI government has so much control and power, then we will eventually end up with AIs that function and think just like 8 does. And that's the danger that I feel Pragmata tries to warn us about. We need to work to make sure that AI doesn't destroy our future, that it can help us, that it can help protect the planet as Diana does, rather than harm it. Right, now it's time for us to get into discussing the gameplay. As I mentioned earlier, Pragmata thrives through how it remixes something familiar with a unique and interesting mechanic. But what makes this work so well is how the hacking mechanic is constantly expanded throughout the game. For example, once the dead filament is introduced, when Diana or the enemies you face are infected by it, certain squares on the grid will now slow you down for a considerable period of time, requiring you to think much further in advance about how to hack an enemy in the most efficient way. There are so many different upgrades that you can give the hacking ability as well, allowing you to plan out a loadout that works for you as you explore the different effects and impacts that you can have on your enemies. It also helps that you won't want to use the same strategies for the same enemies, especially since the bigger ones will require a much different approach in order to take them out smoothly. Now that's how you do a central game mechanic. Not just introducing something cool, but constantly expanding upon it in every new area so that it never gets boring. The movement is pretty good too, although I think it's a bit too stiff to be fluid enough for fast-paced parkour segments, which is odd considering this game has quite a few of those as post-game challenges. I still find those parts of the game fun for sure, but they don't feel like they were built for Hugh's movement. That aside, it still works for what it is, and it's pretty fun to use Hugh's glide and dash to figure out how to get the right amount of momentum in certain sectors of the game. I don't like sprinting being locked to pushing the thumbstick down, but it is what it is. That one nitpick aside, the controls for this game are actually excellently well done too. something that I think deserves compliment given how it could have been easy to mess up this game's control scheme, given how much there is going on. The game has about 6 different major areas, and all of them work pretty well too. There's one themed around New York City that of course is a real eye-catcher, but they all have a distinct vibe. The first area obviously works well as an introduction to the game's mechanics, while the previously mentioned Terra Dome is an aesthetic that fuses the rather oppressive and techy atmosphere of the moon base with that of nature. Other areas though, such as the Lunar Mines for example, introduce a gimmick that lasts consistently through the whole area. The Lunar Mines specifically has this giant worm-like creature that constantly crawls around and emerges out of different craters, constantly causing chaos for Hugh and Diana. There's also these storage crates you have to move around with Diana's hag, which makes for a unique puzzle. The way that every single area in the game introduces some new mechanic that branches off the game's central hacking mechanic genuinely makes for a game that constantly keeps you focused and excited. There's quite a decent amount of enemy variety too, which keeps combat encounters consistently fresh. However, if I did have to nitpick one thing, boss fights were definitely a bit of a weaker point in this game for me. The vast majority of them are just, hey, look, here's a big robot that has different attacks to the last big robot. Now kill big robot. Don't get me wrong, they weren't bad or anything, but if I had to label one part of the game as being pretty forgettable, it would be this part, with the exception of the final boss fight, of course. Now that fight was absolutely incredible and had some crazy attacks and moments, all building up to that exhilarating moment at the end. Which brings me to the game's actual narrative ending, which quite honestly was simple, yet absolutely heart-wrenching to watch. Hugh's realization that he won't be able to make it back to Earth with Diana is so hard to watch, yet he still pushes on, knowing that he can still get her to Earth if he tries to. It makes it even sadder that you are the one that pushes the buttons. You are the one that gets him to this point, only for him to sacrifice his own life so that Diana can make it to Earth. The last scene in the post-credits where Diana is standing on the beach alone got me sobbing. Just like the hacking mechanics are the core of the gameplay, Diana and Hugh's relationship is the core of the narrative, which makes these final moments work absolute wonders as a conclusion. I don't leave this game wondering about a sequel or having any unanswered questions. I leave simply thinking about Hugh and Diana's relationship, how it's a beautiful way to show the relationships that we can have, but also a way to show us how AI can be a good thing for humanity, if we just make more Dianas instead of more 8s. This is a genuinely masterful game, and one that I will be thinking about for quite a long time.